All right, chicos. So this video is just intended to help go through this activity that was assigned in class. This deals with multiple object pronouns, and these object pronouns can get a little bit tricky. So I figured I'd make a video kind of going through this activity and kind of going through it step by step. So first off, our first question here, we've got ¿Quién mandó las invitaciones a mis sobrinas Raquel y María Eugenia? And then the answer to that question of who sent the invitations to my nieces is my daughter. So my daughter sent them to them. Now, what we have to do here is we have to figure out which is the direct object in the sentence and which is the indirect object in the sentence. And then we have to figure out which pronouns we'll use to replace those words. And then what's the order, where do they go, and all that good stuff. So let's again remember the direct object is the thing that directly receives the action. So it usually answers the question what or whom was the result of that verb. So in this case, it's sent, the mandó, that somebody sent something. We want to know what was sent. What was sent were the invitations. The invitations, that is our direct object. And the other option would have been my nieces. Again, we didn't send them, we sent invitations. But now, to whom did we send them? We sent them to my nieces. That would be your indirect object. So you can see the difference between the direct and the indirect here is that, well, when we have the verb to send, it's the thing that is going to be sent is the direct object, not the thing that's going to receive them in this case, which is my nieces. That's going to be, they're the ones that are receiving the action, but indirectly, they're not actually being sent. They're going to get the things that were sent to them. So we know invitaciones now is our direct object. There is a word that we use to replace that direct object, las invitaciones. What word would you use to replace las invitaciones with a pronoun? So we don't need to say invitations again. We can just say them, like who sent them. And then that you should have come up with las. Las is the direct object pronoun. So I'm just going to write the DOP here, the direct object pronoun. And then to whom did they send it? They sent it to my nieces. Now that is our indirect object pronoun. What's the indirect object pronoun for something that's third person and plural? And you should come up with les. Les is our indirect object pronoun. So, all right, now we know we have those two pieces of information that we need for this sentence. And next step we have to do, we have to figure out where to place them. And in this sentence, we only have a conjugated verb. There's no infinitive, there's no present participle. So the only option we have is to put it before the conjugated verb. So mandó is our conjugated verb. We know that we have to put the object pronouns before mandó. So we've got les and las, and they're going to go directly before the verb. So we've got las, we've got les, we put them before the verb, but hopefully you're recognizing that that is not the correct order. Remember, we have a specific order we have to put our object pronouns in, and it should go, if we had a reflexive object pronoun, that would go first, but here we're just going to be limited in this activity to indirect and direct. And that is the order we go in. We go indirect and then direct. So les should come before las. Okay, so now we have our indirect, we have our direct, we have our verb conjugation. That is how we want to have that. However, there's still one more step. Also, notice the spelling here. We've got an L for the direct object. We've got an L for the indirect object. Hopefully at this point, you're starting to recognize when we have two object pronouns that start with the letter L, we change that first one, which will always be the indirect object. We change it to se. So, se las mandó. Now let's actually complete the exercise the right way. And we're supposed to answer this question, which is, the answer is mi hija se las mandó. So this is, who sent the invitations to my nieces, Raquel y María Eugenia. My daughter sent them to them, sent them to them, sent the invitations to the nieces. So that's how that would work. Let's move on to the next one. No pude ir a la tienda para buscar bebidas. So I couldn't go to the store to look for drinks. Who bought the mineral water? ¿Quién me compró el agua mineral? Now here we are going to identify the direct and indirect object pronouns again. So what was bought? What was bought? Because compró is our verb. What was bought? What directly received that action of being bought? And that would be the mineral water, el agua mineral. So when I replace this noun here, this object, I'm going to replace it with a pronoun that correlates with this. Now this one's extra tricky because it says el agua. So you might be thinking lo in this case because of the L. However, this is a little bit misleading, and the L is only here because the way it sounds, el agua, sounds better than l'agua because the A is going together. So this is actually a feminine noun. Agua is a feminine noun. So think about that when you decide which object pronoun we should use. Feminine, singular, direct object pronoun should be la. So la is our direct object pronoun. And now, remember the indirect object answers that to whom or for whom question. So, for whom was the mineral water bought? It was bought for me, me. That'll be our indirect object. So we've got two object pronouns here. And now let's figure out where we're going to put it. We're going to say that my son, mi hijo compró. My son bought it for me. We're going to say my son bought it for me. So we've got our direct object, la, we've got our indirect object, me. And again, hopefully you have alarm bells going off saying that's not the order that it goes in because the direct has to come at the end and the indirect would go first. So let's do that. And there we go. Now we've got our indirect first, we've got our direct next, and then our verb conjugation. Mi hijo me la compró. Now, do we have to do anything with this indirect object pronoun like we did in the last one? We had to change it to a say. We do not have to change it because it doesn't begin with the letter L. Remember, both of them would have to begin with the letter L for us to make that change to say. All right, moving on. So in this one, who loaned me the dishes? We're going to say my mom lent them to me. So which type of object pronoun do we use, or which object is los platos? And that's the direct object here because what was loaned, los platos were loaned. So that's our direct object. So we can replace los platos with los, our direct object pronoun. And then to whom were they lent? We would say me. And that would be our indirect object pronoun. So now we've got a los and me. And we're going to say mi mamá. Now what should go next? We know we're going to have presto as our conjugation, but there's going to be something before that because we always put our object pronouns before our conjugative verb. We have exceptions that we know if we have an infinitive or a present participle, but we're not going to have any of those in these examples. We're going to keep it just with straight up conjugations. So we'll put it before the conjugation, right before it. And in our specific order, our indirect comes first, which is me. Our direct comes next, which is los. Mi mamá me los prestó. Okay, next one. Los entremeses fueron todos muy ricos. ¿Quién nos preparó los entremeses? Sylvia y Renata is our answer. Let's go ahead and try to plug that in. Sylvia y Renata. So they're the answer here. They're the subject of the sentence, and which does make our verb actually is now going to be plural. Prepararon, because we asked who prepared the appetizers, who prepared them. And our answer is actually a plural subject now. So instead of quién, which is one person, the answer ended up being Silvia y Renata. So we have a plural subject. So our verb has to agree with our subject. Prepararon. And then what did they prepare? Los entremeses. That's our direct object. So what's our pronoun there? Should be los to replace los entremeses. And then for whom did they prepare them? for us, and we know that the indirect will come before the direct, so we'll have this as our final answer. No hubo suficientes sillas en el comedor. ¿Quién nos trajo las sillas que faltaban? Héctor y Lorena. So our answer is Héctor y Lorena. And they brought, which would be trajeron, the plural form. And this is one of those morpheme verbs, trajeron. And so they brought people. What did they bring? They brought chairs, las sillas. So they brought those. We're going to replace that with, or which type of object is las sillas? Hopefully you recognize that that is the direct object. What did they bring? They brought them, las sillas. So las is the word we use to replace las sillas. And for whom did they bring them? For us. Nos las trajeron. Next up, and hopefully you're starting to recognize the pattern here. No tuve tiempo de pedirle la sal de la pimienta a Mónica. ¿Quién le pidió la sal de la pimienta a Mónica? So who asked for it? It's going to be mi hijo. Mi hijo is the one who asked for it. And so our verb actually isn't going to change in this time. Just pidió because it's still a third person singular conjugation. Mi hijo pidió, but we got to say asked for it, or I don't know how you want to phrase that, but asked for them as in the salt and the pepper. So if what was asked for was la sal y la pimienta, might be a little tricky for you to recognize this, but this is actually a plural object because we have two things. Even though we don't see a plural word, we see two words, which makes it plural. This is a feminine one, and this is a feminine one as well. So we have a plural and feminine object. So what word do you think we would use to replace that object? Which pronoun do we use? We should use las as our direct object. And then, and who, for whom did we ask it? Or to whom did we ask it? We asked it to Monica, and Monica is going to be the indirect object in this sentence. So which indirect object pronoun should you use to replace Monica with? And it would be le, and that would go before the las. So we have le, las pidió. But again, at this point, hopefully you're recognizing we can't have the double L. So we change the le to se. And that would be the same case even if it were les las pidió. We would change it to se, same word. There's no plural form of se, just use se. So se las pidió. You could add a Monica here. You could add that. Some that's pretty common to see to clarify the indirect object, but we won't here. We'll just keep it consistent. Yeah, actually in that sentence, the a Monica is optional, but the se is not. We need to have that indirect object pronoun. All right, next up, last one. Mis hijos is going to be the response to, I see in parentheses, to what's the question? ¿Quién sirvió el pastel de chocolate a los invitados? So who served the chocolate cake to the guests? My children served it to them. So which is our direct object here? Should be el pastel de chocolate is our direct object because that's what was served. Now the answer for the indirect object, to whom was it served? It was served to the guests. So that would make it our indirect object, the guests, los invitados. So let's go ahead and try to go in the right order. What should come next? What should be the next word here? And we had a direct object, we had an indirect object, and it should be the indirect object that comes first. It's los invitados. We replace los invitados with les. And then it should be our direct object pronoun next, lo. And then we have sirvieron. Sirvieron is a plural answer here. So we have to conjugate that in the third person plural form, sirvieron instead of sirvió. And then again, hopefully you're recognizing the fact that we've got a double L, les, lo. That's a no-no in Spanish to change les to se. So here's an example of where we have a plural indirect object pronoun, but we still just use the word say. Okay, now let's just check our work, make sure we did okay. I feel pretty confident about this. I did it. All right, so I don't know, hopefully that helped you if you needed this little extra run through at a little bit slower pace where you're able to pause the video, hopefully answer the questions in the meantime. We'll keep working with object pronouns. It's not one of the easier subjects when it comes to language or when it comes to Spanish in particular. So we'll keep working on it. Don't feel like you need to be a master right now. We'll just keep improving. All right. If you have any questions, please let me know in class. Hasta luego.